Hello and welcome to this brief video that is going to give you an overview of quoting, paraphrasing, and summarizing from your sources for this research project. The reason that we quote, paraphrase, or summarize is to avoid plagiarism. Plagiarism is when we use an author or author's words, sentence structure, and language without noting the author in the text. When you cut and paste chunks of text directly into your writing without quotation marks, you are plagiarizing. To avoid plagiarizing, we'll practice quoting, paraphrasing, and summarizing from those texts that you're going to be using for your research. Obviously, you don't want to plagiarize. The alternative to plagiarizing is synthesizing. When you synthesize, you take information in and process it to understand how it fits into your research before using the information in your research report. You want to avoid just taking chunks of a text without really understanding the context of that text, and this activity will help us in working through the context as well as using information from our sources. First, I'll overview quotations. You'll want to use quotations sparingly in your final report and only when you absolutely need to use the author's words. Anytime you use a quotation, you're going to want to use something called an attribution tag with the quote, which tells us who is speaking and the credentials of that person or persons. The examples that I'm going to walk through today are taken from a text called Going the Distance, Online Education in the United States 2011. You should be able to use this MLA citation to look up the full text online if you're interested in seeing where I'm taking these passages from. In this first example, I have a quotation and a paraphrase from the text. My passage is, online enrollment continues to grow by roughly 10% a year, and according to Elaine Allen and Jeffrey Seaman of the Babson Survey Research Group, quote, 65% of all reporting institutions said that online learning was a critical part of their long-term strategy. So first I have a paraphrase of the original, and you'll see here in red, the 10% growth rate for online enrollments is the second lowest since 2002. Now to start out this passage, I didn't want to necessarily quote that. That's not important to my main point. So here above you'll see that I paraphrase that to be online enrollment continues to grow by roughly 10% a year. I went on to give the attribution tag. So according to Elaine Allen and Jeffrey Seaman of the Babson Survey Research Group, both tells us who the authors are for the passage and their credentials that are involved with this survey research group. And lastly, you see the specific quotation here. It's a very brief passage of the text that very succinctly states the point that I want to make. So I've quoted it here with the page number in MLA format. And here I've changed it with a direct quote using a page number formatting for APA. And you'll notice in APA the letters PG are included in the parentheses after the quote. APA also differs from MLA in that you insert the year that the document was published in the text as well as the page number. You might also want to paraphrase, which is a restatement in your own words and your own sentence structure of specific ideas from a source. You'll want to cite the paraphrase as you would a quotation, including the author and date in APA or author and page number in MLA. So here's an example of a passage that I want to paraphrase, and this is from that Allen and Seaman text. Online courses are those in which at least 80% of the course content is delivered online. Face-to-face instruction includes courses in which 0 to 29% of the content is delivered online. This category includes both traditional and web-facilitated courses. The remaining alternative, blended, sometimes called hybrid instruction, has between 30 and 80% of the course content delivered online. While the survey asked for respondents for information on all types of courses, the current report is devoted to only online classes. So here's an incorrect paraphrase of that previous passage. And I'm not going to read this over to you, but I'll show you why it's incorrect here in a minute. Basically, what this is doing is it's taking the example text or the direct quote from the text, and it's really only taking out and basically modifying a few of the words in that original text. So I'm going to show you these are the words that are actually changed in that incorrect paraphrase. So the strike through indicates words that are taken out. The red indicates words that have been added to the text. And you'll see a very little bit of the text has actually been changed. So our original's here, And here is what we've changed that. This is not enough to constitute a paraphrase. This is basically just changing a tiny bit of the original text, but leaving most of it in place. So we can look here in green. This is all the original text that's included from the original source without change. That's more than 2/3 of the text of the original passage. That is not enough to facilitate a paraphrase, primarily because the sentence structure still remains in place. All I've done is go in and replace or change a few words. Here's a correct paraphrase of that same statement. The Babson survey addresses only online courses, which are defined as courses that deliver greater than 80% of the course content online. Other courses, such as face-to-face courses, which deliver less than 30% of the course content online, and hybrid or blended courses, which deliver between 30 and 80% of the course content online, were not included as part of the data analyzed in this study. So I want to show you a comparison of the original text and the paraphrase text. Here's the original, and here is the paraphrase. You'll notice a couple of key differences here. The sentence structure from the original is basically completely rearranged. I've summarized the passages that I need, and I've changed quite a bit of the wording. So basically what I want to pull out in this passage is the idea that the Babson survey is only addressing online courses, and then give a really brief explanation of what online entails. So it's covering the same information, but it's doing so in my own sentence structure and wording. Finally, I want to talk briefly about summarizing. Summarizing differs from paraphrasing in that it restates a large portion of the text, but only briefly. Summaries often also use attribution, just as a quotation, in order to inform the reader that the words or the ideas being used are coming from a source and not from the author of the research report. For example, this is a summary that I've done of 2 pages of the major text. Allen and Seaman suggest that online learning might be slowing gradually, but over the 10 years that the survey has been conducted, online learning has still grown at a pace that exceeds face-to-face learning, although faculty attitudes about online learning have been slow to change. So basically I have the attribution. I'm showing that these are the author's conclusions and not mine. And I'm summarizing the main conclusions from 2 pages of the text. So I have 3 kind of summary points: that online learning is slowing gradually, that online learning is still growing at a pace that exceeds face-to-face learning, and that faculty attitudes about online learning have been slow to change. So I'm summarizing 3 main points from the research report covered in those 2 pages of that report very briefly for the text that I'm writing. So remember to use quotes sparingly and only when you absolutely need to capture the wording that the author is using. Provide attribution tags always with quotations and sometimes with paraphrases and summaries when you want to indicate that the ideas are the author's and not your own. And rewrite paraphrases in both your own words and sentence structure to avoid using too much of the text without giving full credit to the authors. As a last point, remember, in order to avoid plagiarism, you'll want to synthesize the text, restate them in your own words, and integrate them smoothly into your writing.